I can't remember exactly when this story takes place, but I'm pretty sure it happened when I was around 4 or 5. My parents and I moved around a lot when I was a kid, and at one point we must have lived next to a park with this big circular trail cutting through a forest. I remember walking around it a lot with my parents, and sometimes I'd go with just my mom, probably when my dad was working. I was lucky to have a good home life, so I had a lot of pleasant memories growing up. But this one memory I had there still haunts me to this day, and I just wonder what might have happened if things turned out just a bit differently. When this event took place, I was there with my mom. I think this was on a weekday afternoon sometime in the summer, but I'm not sure. All I remember is my mom and I running an errand before heading to the park, maybe to return a book to the library. When we got to the park, she filled our water bottles at the water fountain and started the timer on her watch. I think she tried to have us walk for at least 30 minutes to get some exercise, though if it was hot we might stop early. The trail was a strip of asphalt about 10 feet wide with a yellow stripe running down the middle. As a kid, this thing seemed extremely long, but realistically each lap was probably around half a mile. There'd usually be a few other people there, mostly joggers, but some other people walking like us. At some point while we were walking around the trail, I turned around and noticed a man. He was wearing a light tan jacket and basketball shorts. I remember thinking it was odd that he was wearing a jacket since it was almost 80 degrees outside. After I saw him, the man started making silly faces at me, which I thought was funny at first. My mom didn't notice him. All of a sudden, the man walked off the trail and into the trees on one side. I thought this was still part of his joking around, but when the man didn't automatically reappear, I got confused. Eventually I looked forward again. A few minutes later I heard something, like someone slapping their leg. I looked back and saw the man. He made silly faces again and I started laughing, which got my mom's attention. She turned around and saw the man too, and the man immediately stopped what he was doing and just kept walking. I think my mom realized something weird was going on because we started walking faster. The fact that a lot of the trail looked the same made this whole experience rather bizarre. It was also hard to tell exactly how much time passed. I think I saw the man one more time on the trail, but I'm not sure how he got there. He'd faded from view when we started walking faster, so maybe he started jogging or had just cut through the forest. This time the man started walking quietly but aggressively over to me and grabbed my arm. My mom noticed instantly and elbowed him in the face. The man screamed and let go immediately before running back and into the forest. I remember my mom picking me up and running back to her car and then putting me inside before driving off. I can't remember anything after that. Though my mom obviously doesn't want to relive this memory, we have discussed what happened a few times, usually in the context of needing to be aware of your surroundings and staying safe. To this day, we have no idea who that man was, or if he had come after me specifically. I doubt that's the case though. I'm just glad that my mom was there to stop him. When I was in the 2nd grade, my best friend was Amir, and he had a sister named Layla who was several years younger than us. We hung out a lot together as we lived close by, and one time Amir's family went on a trip. I actually went with them. There was more context, such as my parents needing to go out of town around this time, but it doesn't matter for the story. Amir, Layla, and their parents and I were traveling in their SUV from where we lived near Chicago to St. Louis to see the Arch, among other things. Amir's parents had met there while going to college, and they'd go back periodically to visit. We left around 8 a.m. and were planning to arrive so we could eat dinner at the Spaghetti Factory, which apparently is a well-known restaurant in St. Louis. Amir and I were entertaining ourselves with our Nintendo Switches while occasionally looking out the windows. However, sometime after having lunch, Layla started to complain and ask when we'd be there. I remember Amir's mom brought up the fact that we hadn't had a chance to stretch our legs since we'd just gone through the drive-thru. So, Amir's parents started looking for a place to stop, like a park or a rest area. Then we actually saw a sign for a mall. To this day, I can't remember which mall it was, but we pulled off the highway. When we got into the parking lot, we noticed it was extremely empty. To be fair, this was around 2 p.m. on a Saturday, but still, there were only like 10 or so cars in the lot. I think Anna's mom started having second thoughts, but his dad suggested there'd be plenty of space for us to run around in the air conditioning. Soon after we walked inside, we realized it was a dead mall. There were only a few stores left, and incidentally, they all had going out of business sale signs. I remember there was a vitamin store, a Bath & Body Works, a bookstore, and a JCPenney. The mall was all on one level and was laid out like a plus sign, with the food court and kids' play area in the middle. We walked there first and got those pretzels with cheese. Amir's dad told us that we could only spend about half an hour here before needing to get back on the road. After we finished our pretzels, Amir, Layla, and I started playing in the kids' area, which only had a little slide and like 3 other things to climb on. Amir's parents wanted us to go to the bookstore, but after Layla protested, they told us we could stay in the play area, on the condition that we stayed together. They also told us that if anything happened, to come find them in the bookstore. After Amir's parents left, I think we stayed in the play area for about 5 minutes before getting bored. Amir suggested that we start running up and down the halls, since they were all completely empty, but Layla told him their parents said to stay in the play area. I also kind of wanted to stay, since I considered myself to be a guest on their vacation. Amir and Layla started arguing about something else, I'm not sure what, so I just stood on the top of the slide and looked around. Then I heard Layla say she was going to get a cookie from the cookie store in the food court, and Amir yell at her that she couldn't because she didn't have any money. Layla walked towards it anyway, and I stayed with Amir in the play area. A minute or 2 passed, and when Layla didn't come back, we started to get worried. We looked around but didn't see her at either the cookie or pretzel place. There was only one other restaurant still in operation, and we didn't see her there either. The next most logical possibility was that she was in the bathrooms. We walked towards the bathroom sign, which led to a narrow hallway which had the men's, women's, and family bathrooms in it, along with the mall offices and some other janitorial stuff. Amir and I called into the women's restroom, asking if Layla was in there. No one answered. After a moment of hesitation, we checked inside, but no one was there. Amir and I also walked through the men's restroom and checked the family bathroom, but Layla wasn't in there either. I think this is where panic started to set in, and I remember us running back into the food court. Amir went over to the cookie store and asked if his sister had come by there. The worker, who had been on her phone, said she hadn't seen anyone. We checked at the pretzel place and the other restaurant, but no one had seen her there either. Amir and I stood right in the middle of the mall and looked down each of the 4 main corridors, but we couldn't see Layla. I'm pretty sure we both thought about whether or not to search for Layla ourselves versus finding Amir's parents immediately. But as we were genuinely afraid she might be getting abducted, we ran to the bookstore to get his parents. We easily found them inside, and after explaining, Amir's dad started yelling at us while his mom ran outside and started screaming Layla's name. I'm not sure how many people heard her, as this place was basically deserted, but the one employee at the bookstore said she'd call mall security and help us look. Amir's mom went up and down one of the corridors and checked the stores and storefronts along the way, then checked the entrance at the end. We did the same thing with another corridor. We rendezvoused back in the middle at the play area and then split up and checked the other 2 corridors. When Amir and his dad and I got to the end, we checked the entrance and didn't find Layla there. Now there was just the JCPenney, which was the only anchor store still open and not boarded up, so we went inside. It was mostly empty except for a few racks of clothes, and this one area that had toys and a few kids' books. Amir's dad ran around the inside, calling Layla's name, all the while keeping us close. When we reached the back of the store, Amir's dad told us to be quiet. Amir and I heard Layla's voice, and we started heading in its direction. We went through a back door into what I guess was a stockroom section, and went down a narrow hallway which led to another narrow hallway. There, in one of the rooms at the end, was Layla, sitting against the side of the empty room, just crying. Amir's dad scooped her up in his arms while Amir started crying as well. He carried her out of the store, and a moment later Amir's mom and a mall cop showed up. When Amir's mom saw Layla, she started crying and ran over to her. I think we were all very emotional. When Amir's parents asked Layla why she went to the back of the JCPenney, she told us that she had been trying to find their parents after arguing with Amir and getting upset. Apparently she hadn't noticed the bookstore when we walked in, so she went down the other hallway that led to the JCPenney. Then she saw the one area that had children's books in it, and she thought this was the bookstore and went inside. When she didn't find Amir's parents in the main area, that's when she went through the door that led to the stockrooms, and when she couldn't find her way back out, she sat down in one of the rooms and started to cry. Amir's dad apologized to us, since he had assumed we were running around the mall and left Layla at the play area. However, he did scold Amir for arguing with his sister. I don't think that mattered though, and we were all just happy that Layla was with us again. We left the mall and got back on the road, and though we arrived a bit later, we still ate dinner at the spaghetti factory and had a good time. We saw the arch and visited Union Station the next day, and then drove back the day after that. What happened at the mall ended up not being too much of a downer for the rest of our trip, and when I think back to it, it's more to like just a strange memory. However, I'm sure that Amir and his parents, and Layla especially, were a lot more terrified than I was. And I'm just glad that they were all okay. I can't place the story in my mind, and to this day my parents don't remember it having happened. But I'm sure it did, or at least, it was one hell of a vivid memory. One time when I was around 11 or 12, my parents and I were visiting my uncle in West Virginia. We stayed there for about a week before driving back. My uncle was a construction worker, which is one of the things that makes me relatively certain that the story actually did happen. I remember we went to see this big field by a warehouse where they stored concrete pipes. I'm pretty sure my dad and uncle were both there. I think they went there specifically so that I could see the pipes and play around in them, but I'm less sure of that. Anyway, my dad and uncle stayed in one location while I ran around and through some of the bigger pipes, some of which were like 10 feet in diameter. After a few minutes of running and climbing, I stopped because I saw someone. It was a boy who looked to be around my same age, and he was standing on the other end of the pipe I was currently exploring. I said hello, but he just ran off. I assumed he wanted to play, so I ran after him, and when I got there, I saw him running into another pipe. I must have chased him through about 20 different pipes before I finally stopped, out of breath. All the while I had been laughing and saying things like, "I'm gonna get you," but not once did this kid say anything back. I called out one last time, and when I still didn't hear anything, I started to walk back to where my dad and uncle were. Even though it was a rather large storage area of pipes, they were aligned into rows, and I knew which direction I needed to go back. When I was like halfway there, I froze. This kid was just standing in one of the pipes to my left. I was closer to him now than I was before, and I could see he was a bit older, maybe like 15 or 16, and he was just standing there with this blank expression on his face. But nothing could prepare me for what happened next. I was just about to say something when he reached around his back and pulled out a large knife. I took off running and didn't look back. So I don't know if that kid followed me or not. When I got back to where my uncle and dad were, they were joking that I was out of breath. I told them I saw someone else there, but I guess they thought I was joking, because I don't remember them going back to look for the other kid, or calling the cops or anything. Maybe I just blew the situation out of proportion, and maybe it didn't even happen at all. But I'm pretty sure it did. That image of that kid standing in the pipe, holding that knife, is burned into my retinas. And I don't want to think about what would have happened if I hadn't made it back to my dad and uncle in time. When I was a kid, my mom and I used to go to this indoor pool place during the summer. I think it was called Sylvia's Pool or Savannah's Pool, but I can't remember exactly. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, so we'd often go to various places during the day. It was almost never crowded when we went to the pool, so I assume we went earlier in the day. Now this is probably cliché, as I think one of the big aspects of liminal spaces is that we all have them as a collective memory, but this building was essentially the pool rooms. There were the white tiled surfaces, shallow areas, and soft white lighting. There was even this kids area where the entrance to a water slide was behind one of the tiled walls, and it came out in front of it. Maybe whoever thought of the pool rooms was in fact remembering this exact place. Anyway, my mom and I would usually spend about an hour or two there. We typically start and end at the little kids area, and she'd teach me to swim in the main pool. I remember there was also a little room with concessions and a few arcade games, which we'd visit periodically as well. This one day we were in the kids area and my mom had to use the bathroom. I'm not entirely sure how old I was at the time, but maybe because this place was deserted except for the one lifeguard in the main pool area, she let me stay there while she went to the bathroom. In addition to the one slide I mentioned earlier, there was also this playscape thing with water spraying out of a few places and an attached water wheel and water bucket. I was climbing around on it and trying to block the jets of water with my hand when I noticed something. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone in the slide. At first I assumed it was another kid, and I went over to say hello. But just as I got close, whoever it was climbed back up the slide. I remember thinking that was odd, since the inside of the slide was very slippery, but I guess they were just wearing water shoes with a good grip. I walked up the set of steps leading around the tiled wall to the top of the slide, but there wasn't anyone there. I went back around the corner, but that person wasn't there either. So either they had just come back down the slide and run away quickly, or they were hiding in the slide. This is where I started to get sketched out. I walked back to the top of the slide and looked down. I could see through to the exit, so whoever that was no longer hiding inside the slide. I didn't take the slide down, on the off chance that person was waiting right on the other side. Instead, I walked back down the stairs and then to the main pool area. I spotted my mom coming back from the bathroom, and she walked over to me. I told her someone was playing hide and seek in the slide, and I don't think I conveyed how strange it was. My mom just told me to go back and play with them while she did laps. I honestly didn't want to do that, but for some reason I didn't want to try to convince her to come with me. There were a few other people in the main pool and I felt safer there, so I just stayed, splashing around in the shallow end. Eventually my mom finished her laps and came over to me and asked why I didn't want to go back to the kids area. Being an introverted young girl, she must have figured I was just being shy. Therefore, she walked with me back over to the kids area to show me there was nothing to be afraid of, and that I might even make a friend. But neither of us was prepared for what happened next. When we walked up, we initially thought the place was empty, but my mom gasped when she saw someone hiding in the slide. A moment later, the person came down, and we saw it was a man. And not like a teenager, but legitimately someone who was in their 30s. Neither of us knew how to react, but the man stood up and smiled. He said he was here with his son, who had lost something, so he was going around looking for it. Both me and my mom knew that didn't make any sense, as why would he be just waiting inside of the slide? My mom said something like, "I hope you find it," before leading me back into the main pool area and to the front desk. She explained quietly to the lady there how there was a man that was hiding in the slide in the kids area. The lady behind the counter told her that she'd check it out and called someone else who worked there. But before they went in, we saw the man walk out. He'd put on a t-shirt and tennis shoes and was still wearing his swim trunks. We made eye contact as he left, and he smiled while my mom glared at him. By the time another worker arrived at the front desk, he was gone. We stayed there a little while longer talking to the staff, and at one point my mom argued with the manager that there should be some system in place to keep creepy adults out of the kids area. However, I don't blame the staff. What if someone's kid really did lose something, and they had to check everywhere for it? Either way, the staff assured my mom that they'd monitor things more closely in the pool areas, and that they'd be on the lookout for that man. We didn't go back to the pool for a few weeks, but when we did, we never saw that man again. When I think back to it, this memory seems surreal. Not necessarily frightening, just creepy and weird. As I reasoned through it later, I probably should have been more terrified. That kids area was separated from the rest of the main pool room, and apparently that man was pretty quick on his feet since he evaded me when I looked for him. I have no idea what his intentions were, or what he might have done to me, but in any case, I'm just glad I never found out.